Hey guys, and welcome back to the BSofSociety. So, let's talk about bubble universes. If you don't know what bubble universes are, or especially the bubble universe theory, basically it states that every universe, including our own, is just a bubble in a field of other bubbles, right? And every bubble is another universe with events that might be similar, but there are certain little minute differences that change the course of history for each universe and is what makes them different, right? So, this is basically what the bubble universe theory is. And basically this theory makes it to where we aren't the only universe, which would make sense because look all around you. There's more than one of everything, right? And this is kind of what I wanted to talk about, right? I would like to talk about Honky Impact third, and then kind of discuss why I believe in the bubble universe. Talk about Honky Energy, and then maybe whatever else, and then I want to close off this video. That is going to be the structure of this video or series of videos. So let's get started. So, Honky Impact 3, or even Honky Impact 2, if you want to look at that one as well, which is basically Gun Girl Z, are games made by MiHoYo, right? The same company that has made Genshin. Now, MiHoYo is a company that has played with the bubble universe theory time and time again, even in the main storylines. Okay? So, the first instance that they play with the bubble universe theory is when Bronya enters the Sea of Quenta. The Sea of Quenta is basically a void, so to speak, where you can basically see all of the bubbles. But, they're not as condensed as that. It's actually pretty hard to get from one universe to another. Basically for the purpose of you're not supposed to leave your own universe. In the Sea of Quenta is basically where the Honky, the main force of the game, resides. You go outside your own universe, you're likely going to die. You're likely not going to make it back. Now, Bronya enters the Sea of Quenta to find one of the, Honky gems. I believe she was looking for like the Gem of Desire or whatever, but she ended up finding a different gem. But she also ends up coming across a friend that I don't know if she thought she lost her or whatever. I can't remember that far. But she basically runs across a girl named Sele. And this is a Sele that belonged to her universe. Now, what was happening to Sele was that she was basically stuck in a bubble universe that was kind of repeating itself. Every single time she did an action that was kind of wrong, that made the universe kind of spin into a direction it wasn't supposed to go, it's kind of like she got taken out of that bubble universe and put into one almost identical, right? Until she got it right. And then she got brought out of that series of bubbles into another, right? And then eventually she finally gets back to her own world where we continue the Honky Impact story. Now, in terms of the main storyline, we don't really have another instance of bubble universes per se. I mean, we have an instance of like illusions, but not really another bubble universe until we get to the extension of chapter 25. If y'all played the De Ankara Durandal event back in like November or so of 2020, basically you find out that when Durandal was about 12 years old, she went into a bubble universe that Odo wanted her to basically go and save. Every universe has basically an anchor that kind of is what keeps it alive. It's what keeps the bubble from breaking, right? Now, the Honky in Honky Impact, which if you look at the translation of Honky, from Japanese to English, if I remember correctly, it basically translates to collapse, right? So Honky craves the collapse of universes, right? Often in Honky Impact, you'll hear Honky be referred to as Honky energy or collapse energy, destructive energy, right? This is an energy that does indeed exist in every universe, including our own. It doesn't have to be a physical force like the Honky. Okay. Now, Durandal essentially failed in her initial mission because the Honky does indeed destroy this single anchor, and the universe starts to fall apart. However, Durandal is the one that saved it. Now, keep in mind, I'm not referring to the Valkyrie. I'm referring to the sword. There was a sword in this universe named Durandal that when you found all of the gems that it could absorb to increase its power, it would basically have enough power to act as another anchor. Now, the Valkyrie Durandal, whose real name is actually Bianca, absorbs this sword, which basically means she becomes the anchor that holds this universe together. And this is when Bianca takes the name of Durandal. Okay. Which basically means that Durandal's soul in her entire persona is basically what holds this universe together. If the Honky or anybody else were to kill Durandal, this bubble universe would die. It would burst into a million different parts and cease to exist. There are other instances of bubble universes in the events that have existed throughout Honky Impact. Specifically with like Captain's Bizarre Adventure, where the captain basically goes from universe to universe to universe, often forgetting what he's supposed to be doing. But you just see a bunch of different universes and different series of events of every single world. The last event that was just there was basically a dream world of Sele, where the Honky were actually more like Pokemon in a way. They weren't actually destructive. Right? So you can kind of see the differences among every single world, even just in Honky Impact alone. Right? Now, in Honky Impact, there are two major things besides the bubble universes. The Sea of Quenta, which I've already mentioned, again, is basically a sea of bubbles. You can't really see the bubbles too much. Imagine in our own universe where the galaxies spread more apart, where basically it would be pretty rare to get from one galaxy to another. That is basically the Sea of Quenta. The void in between all of the galaxies is the Sea of Quenta, right? where it's basically just all nothing. And pretty much the only thing that exists there is quantum honky, right? And anybody else who managed to get trapped within the Sea Quenta. And then there's one other very important structure called the imaginary tree. The way I pictured the Sea Quenta in the imaginary tree is basically kind of similar to the end in Minecraft. When you enter the end, you basically enter the main island, which you can kind of imagine where the imaginary tree sits, because this is where the main Minecraft world exists, right? In that little fountain, that's where the Minecraft world exists. Now, instead of it being a fountain, imagine an imaginary tree that holds thousands upon thousands of different universes. Okay? And then when you spread out and you have all those little islands away from the imaginary tree, those are all of your bubble universes. So, imagine yourself building basically a dome around these little islands, putting a bunch of trees and all that, and treating each and every single one of these as its own universe. That is basically the Sea Quenta in the imaginary tree. Now, this imaginary tree is very important. According to Odo's findings in the main story, basically this imaginary tree protects the universes that is binded to it from the honky. Okay? So what Odo plans to do in the new extension of chapter 25 is basically take this universe that's binded to Durandal and bind it artificially to the imaginary tree, and then basically separate this universe from Durandal. Because theoretically, this imaginary tree should be able to protect the universe from the honky and prevent the universe from being destroyed. And I guess that would also mean that the imaginary tree would also act as an anchor, kind of similar to the limb of a leaf. So basically in the imaginary tree, instead of there being bubble universes, it's basically leaf universes, right? Leaves can't be destroyed as easily as a bubble can. A bubble, all you really have to do is take a needle to it and it pops. A leaf, even if you step on it, the odds of it breaking are very slim, right? Therefore, protecting it from destruction. So, for the bubble universe theory, Honky Impact especially plays with it pretty well and has even more different theories than just the bubbles. Where you have an imaginary enemy force called the Honky that craves to basically pop every single bubble, where you have a tree that essentially turns these bubbles into leaves, protecting them from being able to be destroyed. And the reason why I wanted to mention Honky Impact in this video as well is because I want to look at it in terms of our universe, okay? We don't have honky beasts in our world. We don't have zombies. Our world is actually one of the most peaceful universes that could ever exist. However, even among, universes that are in a leaf shape instead of a bubble, there is still destructive energy that can destroy it. Leaves eventually decay. Leaves eventually fall apart from the tree and fly away, once again becoming another bubble universe. Being able to be destroyed, most brown leaves, you can step on them and easily break them. This would be no trouble for the honky. Honky, and more specifically honky energy, exists in every universe. Whether it's just for the destruction of stars or nuclear bombs, they exist. In Honky Impact, Honky exists as a physical being named Honky that you can physically fight with weapons. That's not the case in our universe, is it? COVID-19 is an example of the Honky. Ourselves are an example of the Honky. Look at what happened last summer. In 2020, we were at each other's throats. Somebody was controlling everybody. They were controlling the narrative. There's a Hesher in Honky Impact named the Hesher Dominance that's basically broken up into like 1,000 different puppets. That was what last summer was. Last summer was a big demonstration of what the Honky can do. And they were doing it through humans alone. No zombies, no Honky beasts. We ourselves are the Honky of this universe. Look at how much destruction we have already caused to animals and life alone. And then look at what we do to ourselves. Humans will be the humans will be the cause of their own demise in this universe. We will destroy our own universe. This is why the Honky in every single universe pretty much wants to destroy everything, because 1, it's in their name, 2, humans are trash. And even in a universe where Honky doesn't exist, we are still at each other's throats. Right? So, looking at Honky energy is also very important because you know that it exists. You just got to figure out where it exists so you can eradicate it. And in our universe, it's ourselves. Especially those that just want to fight all the time. It's much harder to fight an enemy that looks like yourself. In Honky, the Honky looks like Honky. In a zombie apocalypse, the Honky looks like zombies. But in our universe, the Honky looks like ourselves. So, even the same form of destruction is not always the same in every bubble universe. And that's why I wanted to mention Honky Impact and its role in describing the bubble universe. Now I want to get into why I believe in it. Why I believe in the bubble universe theory. Before I get into why I believe in the bubble universe theory, there were a couple things that I wanted to mention that I forgot to mention. The importance of dream worlds, right? So, in a way, whenever we have a dream, especially like lucid dreams and stuff where we can remember it, it's basically another world. Now, when you leave the dream world, the world basically destroys itself, right? You might still have memories of the world. If you can pull the world back up through another lucid dream, you can get the world back. But other than that, the world destroys itself. Not that it doesn't still exist, but just it destroys itself in a way, right? And that's kind of what Cele's dream world reminded me of, is that you can basically have your own worlds, And even for Durandal, I'm sure she sees that world every single time she dreams, whether she can remember it or not, because it is a part of her soul. Why else can we have lucid dreams that are so powerful that it can help us? I wouldn't be surprised if people like Elon Musk or Isaac Newton actually had dreams that helped them with all of their research and all of their infrastructure. You can't just have things like that magically. I don't see any way. There's one more thing that I feel like I kind of babbled on. When I was talking about hunky energy, I pretty much mentioned like what it is and all of that, that it's basically either hunky bees, zombies, us, in our own universe, it's us, especially those that are easily controlled. I mean, because there are so many people that just have rage upon rage that you just can't contain it. Similar to the hunky, I mean, look at the chapter where Syrian finally goes away for good in Hunky Impact 3. She just could not control her anger at all. Ring a bell? Because again, the hunky craves destruction of every universe. And there's something important about that, right? The hunky is basically a form of our own mortality. No one, not even gods, live forever. Okay? This universe will eventually die by the hands of the hunky. Okay? And the reason why the bubble universe has to go away is because there can only be so much space for bubble universes. You can't have 100 billion human beings on Earth, can you? People have to die. That is why all of our lives are on a time limit. Our own universe is on a time limit. Eventually, it will die. Even the imaginary tree in the Sea of Quenta will die. The Sea of Quenta will die. The hunky, in and of its entirety, will die, just to be replaced by more hunky, more Sea of Quenta, and another imaginary tree. All good things must come to an end. The hunky ensures us of that. Right? And no matter how much we fight, no matter how many battles we win against the hunky, we will eventually lose the war. The hunky has a very, very important existence. And I think it deserves its own video. We'll see about that, considering the fact that I kind of already explained a lot of it anyways. But, just so you realize that this universe will eventually end. Anyways, let's continue on with what I wanted to talk about, which was why I believe in the bubble universe. So, the reason why I believe in the bubble universe theory is simple. There is no way we are the only beings that exist in the universe, right? Look at everything, right? There's more than one element. There's more than one planet. There's more than one moon. There's more than one of everything in the universe. So, how come we would be the only universe to exist? I mean, like, you look at religions, right? They basically made Earth the center of everything. But that turned out to be entirely false. We don't have the only star. There's no way we have the only livable planet. There's no way we have the only universe. Honky Impact made me a believer of the bubble universe theory. Because you can have multiple universes. They might look nearly the same, but you can have multiple universes. Look at all of the games in movies and books that we have made over our history. Believe it or not, we ourselves are gods. Even for the Honky Impact universe, Mihoyo is a god of that universe. Every account that you make is just yet another birth of the universe. My own Honky Impact account is just one bubble universe of all of them. Okay? Your Genshin accounts are one bubble universe of all of them. Okay? Every single account is its own bubble universe where things happen differently. Every time I make a new Borderlands playthrough, things just happen differently. I don't always get the same weapons. I'm not playing with the same units. I'm not playing with the same skill points. I'm not playing the exact same way with the exact same things that happened. And even mechanically, like for Honky Impact, things happen to the Honky Impact third characters, but that's just one universe that doesn't exist to my own Honky Impact third units on the Hyperion of my own ship, of my own account. Right? We ourselves are masters of creating more universes. And yeah, you might be like, oh, but Hollywood has a bunch of acting. Anime is just a bunch of artwork. How can this be an example of bubble universes? Just look at Sword Art Online. Sword Art Online made a world called Alicization, which was essentially a world ran by a computer. Right? It was an entirely different universe. And at the beginning of that season, Kirito basically had two different minds. He had his mind in the game world where he didn't know that the real world existed. And then you had the real world where he knew about the game, but he wasn't sure of things that happened within the game. Does that ring a bell? We have often joked about us being in a game world. We may very well could be in a game world. There's a Hollywood show that even has pretty much the exact same thing, where you have a character in the game and then somebody else that knows that there's another world out there. We have made our own bubble universes, maintained by our own PCs. Right? Mihoyo's servers is basically the anchor of all of our Honky Impact accounts. Now here's the deal though. Even if those servers were to go down, I bet those universes would still exist. One day, we may very well find a way to travel into the Sea of Quenta and find more than just our own universe, even universes that we have ourselves created. We will likely not, none of us in this generation will ever see that day. Not until the day we die. But I bet we would have the way to travel among universes. But the fact that we've made our own universes just proves that this bubble universe theory very well exists. Maybe not in a sense of bubbles, but just the multiverse itself exists. And we have played with it so much. Now we just need to find a way to actually travel to these other universes. Similar to time travel, right? Speaking of time travel, before we get into time travel, I just wanted to mention one thing. So, the reason why I say that if the MiHoYo servers were to shut down, Honky wouldn't necessarily go away, or like our accounts wouldn't necessarily go away, our bubble universes wouldn't necessarily go away, is because they've existed, right? And they will be there forever. Even if a bubble universe were to be popped per se and destroyed, it'll disintegrate into trillions upon trillions upon trillions of little pieces that still exist. Right? When a computer hard drive gets wiped and all of its data is deleted, that doesn't really go anywhere, does it? And the reason I say that is because you know that old saying where if you don't want something on the internet that could be used against you later in the future, don't put it on there, because the internet basically holds all of this information permanently. That holds true. Okay? When you put, say, a picture of yourself onto the internet, you're not just putting it onto the internet. Google is taking that photo. Other companies are taking that photo. So even if you were to delete the photo off of your phone and actually say, delete it from the internet, it's not completely deleted from the internet. Somebody has archived it. Somebody has put it onto their server or onto their PC. That little piece has never truly been deleted. Right? Now, in terms of, say, downloading a Minecraft world, you remember the thing that I was talking about with Sele, where she was kind of in the same bubble universe, quote unquote, but like things were kind of changing? It's kind of also like that. Say if I were to put my Honky Impact account onto the internet for people to download, right? You would all download it, but then different things would start to happen to each bubble universe. The bubble universe has now split up, right? And this right here directly goes into time travel that I'm going to mention, and I'll probably have to add in a little bit of another part after I'm done with it, because this directly goes into time travel, right? But before we get into time travel, basically what I'm saying is that even if you were to delete something, it's never truly deleted. If a universe were to get entirely destroyed, it's never truly destroyed. It just gets broken up into millions of pieces. Whether those pieces form into another bubble or not just depends. Right? And it's important to keep this in mind. Anyways, let's move on to time travel. So, for time travel, we often say that if you were to go back in the past and say, kill Hitler before he starts World War II, you would alter the course of events, correct? But what if you don't go into the same universe when you travel in time? See, the way wormholes work and the way portals work, right? For example, like say if you go through the teleporter on COD Zombies, you are basically, say, taking the palm of my hand and bringing in, say, Venus right next to each other, right? But they aren't right next to each other, are they? No. They're kilometers apart. Thousands of kilometers apart. Say if you wanted to travel from the sun to the edge of the solar system, that's a light year. But if you had a portal, you could get to the edge of the solar system in a mere second. This is why in Star Trek, for example, it's called warp. You're warping from one space to another. That's why you see the stars in kind of a weird way, because you're basically taking one edge of space and linking them together. Now, imagine doing this to universes, where you take one universe, one end, and link them together, and then you travel between the two universes, but because the two universes have kind of a different time scale, you think you traveled back in time, but you really didn't. Okay? So then you alter the course of history of this universe, and then when you go to travel back to the present, you think you traveled back to the present, but you just traveled to yet another universe. This is the exact same thing as Captain's Bizarre Adventure. He travels from universe to universe. It's hard to get to a universe if you don't have the means to travel to another universe. That's why it's so rare to be able to get to another universe, because you have to have the means. Just like you have to have the means to be able to go from the Milky Way galaxy all the way to Andromeda. There's no theory of relativity if you can travel there in mere seconds without having to travel at the speed of light. The maximum speed is the speed of light, but no one said you can't use a portal. Right? So, in a sense, if you were to go back and quote unquote change time, would you really be changing time? Likely not. Because the only way you can really time travel in your own universe is by going back to the center of the bubble. They say before we continue to the next part, there's something I kind of wanted to mention. So, we all know that we're living in a 3D dimensional world. That's not really entirely true, is it? There is a fourth dimension. You have your space dimensions, which is basically, your X, Y, and Z coordinates. But then you also have time. Now, I know scientists have always thought of the idea of being able to travel through this fourth dimension. But I'm going to be honest, I don't think it's as easy as traveling through space. You see, because of you being able to bend space as easily as, say, a black hole could, or even a wormhole, you could easily think you traveled through time, but in actuality, you just traveled through space universes apart. Okay? Where you end up in an entirely different universe that you end up changing the course of history of. Because you're there and you just killed somebody who started the Holocaust, right? But the history would change for that universe. Okay? So then you go to travel back to the present. Do you really travel back to the present? Or did you go, say, the same direction that you just went and found another bubble universe that had that quote-unquote change? You see, because when you make a change in the universe, you could possibly break it apart. Right? Imagine a single cell, a single blood cell. When it divides basically into two clones of each other. But do they have the same course of history? No. One day you might get cut, and then one of those clones drips out. The blood cell dies, but its clone is still living. Okay? So say in one universe, like this one, I don't get a girlfriend, for example, correct? This universe now breaks apart. So you have two clones of me not having a girlfriend. In one of these clones, I happen to get a girlfriend, and in the other, I don't. So when you go to travel, quote unquote, back through time to right before Hitler started the Holocaust, you kill Hitler, but at that point, the bubble universe has already broken into two separate pieces. Okay? And then when you kill Hitler, it once again breaks into two separate pieces. So the bubble is like continuously breaking into multiple different forms of the same universe. This is why, for example, when Sele was running through that same bubble universe, she kept getting thrown back because she kept getting thrown back to the events before the bubble universes that she was in. It was the same bubble universe, quote unquote, but it was broken up into a bunch of different pieces that all had the same start point, but didn't continue in the same light. This is the reason why you're able to create, say, a new Borderlands playthrough, but get an entirely different weapon. They all have the same start point, but they don't have the same course of events, per se, right? You get a different weapon on this playthrough. You get instead of getting a gold weapon, you get a purple weapon, right? So, do you necessarily travel through time or just through space? Right? Now, keep in mind about Einstein's theory of relativity. Okay? You know how sometimes you'll have that slow day, quote unquote, and then sometimes you'll have that fast day, quote unquote? That's relative to you. In terms of time itself, 24 hours went by on Earth. The Earth itself aged another 24 hours. But what about you? Did you age faster or slower? Do we really live 100 years? We live about 100 years. But what if humans had exactly 100 years to live? But because of the theory of relativity and how days go by faster for some of us, we die sooner. And for those of us where the days go by slower, or no, I got that reversed. For those that the days go by faster, you end up living to your 120s because the day went by faster. You didn't age as much as somebody else. However, for those of us that age slower, in terms of the ones that are aging faster, you might die in your 80s because every day was much longer for you, right? I mean, because that's how I can kind of picture the theory of relativity. Now, according to Einstein, when you travel at the speed of light, you're essentially like stopping time in a way. This kind of makes sense, especially when you look at something like a black hole, because a black hole has so much gravity. And if you know how gravity works, gravity is basically just warping space and time. Notice that, right? If we ever were to able harness the power of gravity, we might actually be able to travel through time, because gravity can alter space and time in a way. But even so, time is still moving forward, even for the black hole. The time is never really moving backwards. The only way you'd ever really be able to travel through time is if you can figure out how to get time to move forward or backwards quicker. But keep in mind, technically speaking, it's still relative to yourself. Your life goes back 20 hours, but that's just the world going back 20 hours, not yourself. See, if you were to make a time machine to travel 2,000 years into the past, would you actually travel 2,000 years into the past? Probably not, because it's all relative to yourself. You would see all these bubble universes in a different light, yes, but you've only traveled 2,000 years into the past relative to yourself. This fourth dimension isn't as easy to travel through as is space. Right? Space is a little bit more linear, it's expansive, it's expanding, and you can easily travel from universe to universe. But for time, not so much. Right? It's confusing to look at and to question. But, we can all have our different thought processes on it. And it would be nice to be able to travel through time one day, with the exception of possibly having time change. But it's like this, right? If time travelers exist, how come time doesn't change for us? If somebody actually went back in time and killed Hitler, which somebody obviously did, say 2,000, 3,000, 5,000 years from now, somebody gains access to time travel, but we never see time and its events actually change. Because the moment you alter the course of history, the universe breaks apart. And you end up having the original universe with its original course of history, and then this new universe. The only person that had time change for them was the one that had time relative to themselves. Interesting, right? I just want y'all to think about that as we finish up the remainder of this little video here. Time to continue that little cliffhanger I left off with. They say our universe is still expanding, right? But I want to look at why it's still expanding. When you blow a bubble, it kind of spreads out and spreads out, gets bigger until it eventually just pops off. And now you got a full sphere with everything of the universe inside it, time, history, all that, correct? Where that force is coming from, that initial force to initially expand the universe, it's not a full 360 expansion until the universe is fully formed, to where the universe can get bigger and bigger. Kind of similar to how a fruit grows, right? For example, an apple. It kind of expands, not really in every single direction, does it? No. I mean, in terms of the center of the apple, sure, but not necessarily all the way around, right? This is kind of similar to the universe. We can still look and see kind of where that force of the expansion is kind of coming from, right? You can look into space and see that. But a lot of scientists tell us that we're essentially looking through time when we're doing that, which I guess you can say is kind of a form of time travel in a way. However, you can't really just travel to there, because if you travel to there by space in, the normal fashion of the speed of light, would you necessarily get there to still see the expansion? Or is it already done and gone and we're a fully formed universe at this point? Right? And this kind of continues with the whole time travel discussion, that really you can't just travel through time. I mean, you can see through time because it takes time for space to expand. That's why it's called space and time. But in terms of traveling through it, because of the relativity, would you really travel through time if you were to just warp over there? And even physically traveling, because all that light is basically still coming, that expansion would, one, look different, and two, like I said, might not even be there. Or would it still be there? There was one video I watched a while ago that kind of mentioned something that would go against Einstein's theory a little bit, I think. So basically, when light comes out of the sun, right? This light is traveling against gravity, isn't it? We know, thanks to black holes, that light is also affected by gravity. Which means it's not really going at its full speed, is it? No. Not only that, why is there a speed limit of the speed of light? Is there really a universal speed limit? We all know laws are meant to be broken eventually. We have, a couple waterfalls that are falling backwards, where they're actually upfalls, essentially. Where the waterfalls are basically going in the opposite direction. That's a major exception to the force of gravity, is it not? The rule has been broken. Okay, let's look at life, right? How is it that life is able to exist in a volcano or in the most frozen waters on the planet? Right? And this goes further to show that we're not just the only ones in the universe, because if life can exist in conditions like that, there might even be more life on our own in our own solar system, right? But basically what I'm saying is that light coming from the sun is traveling against gravity from the sun. It escapes the sun, yes. But what does that mean about its speed? As it's leaving the sun, its speed is continuously slowing down. Now, what I'm getting at is, what if the light that we see from the Big Bang is actually hitting our eyes the moment it leaves the Big Bang? As in, it's actually at max speed, right? Like the max of the max. Infinite of infinite. That kind of speed. Right? Because you can warp through space. I mean, we've seen it on Star Trek. You can warp through space to get to another universe in an instant. Why can't light? What I'm trying to say is, are we really looking through time in the universe? Just by looking up in the night sky? I don't think so. I don't think we're just merely looking through time. We're looking through space as well. We can see the expansion of the universe straight from its core. Is our universe really done expanding? Is the Big Bang still going on? It's only been, 14 billion years, I think? Or more? I would imagine it would probably take trillions of years for a universe to get done blowing to a full-formed bubble. In some of these other universes, like Honky Impact, the universe may very well be done forming. So now the Honky is there ready to destroy it because it's no longer attached to its tree. And even so, when cells divide, another bubble is also forming. It may very well even be that Big Bang spot, matter and antimatter? It may very well be that if you were to travel through that hotspot, you may very well get to the other side and see another universe that is a complete anti to our own. Matter and antimatter are basically opposite twins, and you're like fraternal twins. I mean, but you're not necessarily just traveling through time, or you're not just looking through time, you're looking through space as well. What if that light traveled faster than we think? This wouldn't necessarily be a break or a breach in Einstein's theory either, because that light still had its own relative time. We still had our own relative time. The universes still had their own relative time. But the relativity of time wouldn't be based on the speed that you're traveling, but more so maybe from gravity or some other force that we just don't know about yet, like dark matter or whatever that would just block light out. Basically what I'm saying is I'm making a lot more questions for us than I honestly should. That is basically what I'm saying is we come to conclusions for certain things, I feel like a little too quickly. And I don't know, it's just something that I found interesting in one video that kind of made me question whether light does actually travel at the speed Einstein set, or is it faster, making that Big Bang still a thing that's happening in the current. I don't know. But I think we can now head to the conclusion of this video. Basically, everything that I have discussed thus far is basically everything for the bubble theory. And most of my opinions at this point right now, or most of my thought process, has kind of been sparked because of Honky Impact Third and a bunch of other videos that I watched. Honky Impact Third made me a real believer of the bubble universe. Just because, we have so many different games of our own, so many universes that we've made of our own, that there's just no way other universes just don't exist. And there's bubbles among bubbles among bubbles. Right? Even the Sea Aquenta in the imaginary tree isn't the only Sea Aquenta in imaginary tree. There's an even bigger Sea Aquenta in imaginary tree. Stacked and stacked and stacked. Just like Allottization in SAO. You have the real world, you go into Allottization. What if eventually Allottization ends up making their own new worlds? Universe upon universe upon universe. For a programmer, you can look at it more like recursion, where you have the same chunk of code repeating and repeating and repeating, but the stack is unlimited. Imagine that. And we are somewhere within this stack, possibly at the very, very bottom or top, wherever new universes are being stacked in. Yeah, so we would be at the top, right? Actually, we wouldn't necessarily be at the complete top, but, right? And, the bubble universe theory just signifies that our lives are very, very insignificant. And that time travel, it kind of also speaks on time travel as well, that it's just like, is it really that easy to travel through time? Or are we just traveling through space? How do you necessarily travel through time? Does speed really have a limit? When you speed too fast in a video game, you might break some of the laws, but you can still travel. No one said you can't travel faster than that. And does that really affect time? No. You could make your speed in Minecraft times 10,000, but the speed in the Minecraft world would still be the same. Only would you have a slower time, right? but you're still traveling through space. So which means the Big Bang could still be happening and hitting our eyes the instant it's coming out. You know? Anyways, this is the conclusion of this entire video. Honestly, this video alone may have sparked me wanting to make a few more videos, even more like about time travel or whatever. And I would suggest you guys leaving your own thoughts, agreements, disagreements. You can tell me how wrong I am. I don't care, because scientific discoveries take discussion and thought. Correct? I mean, how else have we gotten to where we are today, where we have physical electronics that allow me to record this video? So anyways, with that being said, guys, I'll talk to you guys later.